It was the year 1367 of our Lord in La Rioja, Spain. In the vicinity of Nájera, a Franco-Castilian army of about 8,000 men was encamped. This force was led by Enrique of Trastámara, half-brother of the King of Castile and pretender to the Castilian throne. Supported by the Kingdom of France, Enrique had numerous French mercenaries under the command of Bertrand du Guesclin, a warlord in the service of King Charles V of France, and a veteran of the 100 Years' War. He commanded the free companies of mercenaries from France, who after losing their job in the peace treaty of Cali, supported Enrique of Trastámara. Enrique's army also had Castilian light cavalry, useful for ambushes and assaults on supply lines, who were commanded by Enrique's brother, Don Teo. In addition to the Castilian and French troops, numerous Aragonese knights had attended Enrique's call, under the command of Don Alfonso, cousin and vassal of Pedro IV of Aragon. With the light of dawn, the enemy army emerged from the horizon. An Anglo-Castilian host at the service of the legitimate King of Castile at that time. Pedro I, nicknamed the Cruel by his enemies, and the Just by his supporters. Accompanying Pedro was Edward of Woodstock, Prince of Wales and heir to the English throne. Nicknamed the Black Prince, the son of Edward III of England had offered his support to Pedro I in exchange for using the powerful Castilian fleet in the next war against France. Therefore, the Black Prince, together with his brother John of Gaunt and the Constable of Aquitaine, John Chandos, actually commanded Pedro's army, since most of it was made up of English troops. Also supporting Pedro I was King John IV of Majorca, Count Jean I of Armagnac, and Count Gaston III of Foix. In total, Pedro's army consisted of about 10,000 men, made up of the Castilian nobles who supported him, English troops from Great Britain and Aquitaine, hosts from Navarre, Majorca, Foix and Armagnac, and German, Dutch and Norman mercenaries. As soon as Enrique's troops noticed the arrival of the Black Prince, chaos broke out in the camp.
Unité, attendez mes ordres!
Bertrand du Guesclin organized an improvised first defensive line, while some of the Castilian light horsemen defected to the enemy side. Finally, Enrique's commanders managed to establish some sort of battle order. In the center of Enrique's army was Bertrand du Guesclin, dismounted and surrounded by his heavy French mercenaries. The French leader also placed crossbowmen among his ranks. On the left flank, Enrique had placed his brother Don Teo with the Castilian light horsemen, as well as a personal guard for Don Teo himself. On the right flank stood Alfonso of Aragon with his heavy Aragonese knights and some light horsemen. From the rear, Enrique of Trastámara himself watched, surrounded by the elite of his knights. By the time Enrique organized his troops, the Black Prince was already ready for battle. As a vanguard, he had placed his brother John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, and John Chandos, with a heavy contingent of mercenaries. On the left wing were the troops from the counties of Foix and Béarn, and on the right wing the Gascon troops from the county of Armagnac. The entire first line was preceded by the famous English archers that Edward III had sent to his son from the islands. James IV of Majorca stood at the rear, along with a host of Arabs from the Kingdom of Granada. Behind the first line were the Black Prince and Pedro I of Castile, surrounded by the elite of Castilian and English knights. According to the French chronicler Jean Froissart, the Prince of Wales went out to the fields as soon as dawn. When the sun came up, it was a great beauty to contemplate the banners in the wind and the armor shining under the sun. Once the armies were in formation, the French commander du Guesclin was informed of the horsemen who had deserted, and he realized that he no longer had enough numbers to remain on the defensive. Thus, he announced the advance, and the entire first line of Enrique of Trastámara marched towards the enemy. In this fierce first clash, Du Guesclin's troops fought hand-to-hand with the Duke of Lancaster. However, Enrique's light cavalry, who had charged from the flanks, found themselves decimated by English longbows. Hardly engaging in hand-to-hand combat, Enrique's horsemen fled. Witnessing the frustrated attack, both Don Teo and Alfonso of Aragon charged with their host of heavy knights. Many knights were dismounted, and the hand-to-hand fighting raged. While Du Guesclin's mercenaries were still locked in a melee with the Duke of Lancaster's troops, Enrique's troops on the flanks began to give way. Finally, most of Don Teo's knights fled. The Aragonese went on the defensive and tried to regroup with Du Guesclin's mercenaries. The Castilian chronicler Pedro López de Ayala narrates it as follows. And Don Teo, brother of King Don Enrique, Lord of Lara and Vizcaya, who was on horseback to the left of King Enrique's vanguard, did not wish to fight, and those on the right wing of the prince's vanguard, who were the Count of Armagnac, and those of Lebret, and many others who came in that group, straightened Don Teo, and he and those who were with him did not wait for them, and they moved from the field at full speed, fleeing. It was after the flight of Enrique's flanks that Pedro's troops in the flanks surrounded the mercenary contingent of Du Guesclin. Watching his troops flee from the battlefield, Enrique was forced to charge the bulk of the Black Prince's troops in a desperate attempt to save his infantry. However, the English archers were waiting for him to the right and left of the enemy army. The chronicles narrate this episode as follows. and King Don Enrique came 2 or 3 times on his horse in full armor to help his people who were standing, making sure all his people who were with him on horseback did as well. And when he arrived where the battle raged, and he saw that his people were not fighting, he had to return. Enrique's horsemen fell prey to English arrows, and 3 times they charged the enemy. None of the 3 cavalry charges would be effective. With most of his cavalry in flight and the bulk of the French infantry surrounded, Enrique's infantry reserve launched a desperate charge. However, demoralized by their lost allies, and under a heavy rain of arrows, the remaining men of Enrique took flight as well. King Enrique did not fail to fulfill his duty well and fight with courage and audacity, nor in comforting and admonishing his people, going ahead of those who were fleeing and saying to them, "Gentlemen, I am your king. You have made me king of all Castile and sworn that you would not fail me until death. Keep your oath for God and take it out on me, and I will take it out on you. For I will not flee a single foot while I see you fight." With these words and many others full of consolation, King Enrique rallied his men 3 times that day, and he himself fought with such valor that he should be honored and commended. But Enrique's words were of little use, since what remained of his retinue left the battlefield over the narrow bridge of Nájera on the way to the city. Du Guesclon's mercenaries were still surrounded and were victims of a great onslaught. At the end of the day, Pedro I was victorious, and the corpses of Enrique's men lubricated the battlefield. However, Enrique of Trastámara himself had managed to escape. When the Black Prince heard this, he exclaimed, "Nothing is done," then, because in reality, Pedro I had not ensured his permanence on the throne, and was indebted on all fronts. As a result, he failed to keep his agreement with England, and he lost the support of the Prince of Wales. That earned him a reputation as a defaulter among the European nobility, which condemned him to international isolation. Thus, Pedro had won the Battle of Najera, but the winner of the First Castilian Civil War would be decided 2 years later in the fields of Montiel.